I actually like running puzzles, and for the most part, my players like it too. But the problem that I run into, that I think everybody runs into, is sometimes it slows the game down to a slog. So, here are 3.75 ways to make sure you never run a boring puzzle again. First of all, give them alternate win conditions. I ran a dungeon once full of puzzles and riddles, but I knew in advance that about 2/3 of the player characters involved in it were going to be barbarians, and everyone at the table were staunch role players. If Ungbar didn't know what the puzzle was, they didn't know what the puzzle was. So, I made all the doors and chests and boxes that were guarded by the puzzles out of wood, so they could just smash their way through it if they needed to. They didn't wind up doing that, but giving alternate win conditions is a way to keep puzzles from becoming boring, because when they get to the point where they're banging their head against the wall because they haven't found your solution, when they come up with a solution, it'll be just as good. Next, make it tactile. I use index cards to make puzzles. So, for instance, I used one where I drew little pictures on index cards, and the players had to figure out what part of the room these went to. But they had to move them in character while the room was filling with poisonous gas, and they had to be rolling constantly constitution checks. So they had a physical item that they could touch and hold, and then they had to move their character in-game to the location they wanted to put it, taking up time and, rolling constitution checks as they did so. But they had something in their hands that they could touch, and they had something to do that wasn't just sitting around trying to figure out what needs to be done. Next, make it cooperative. If you do a puzzle that only involves one person to solve, like asking a riddle, one person solves it while everyone else plays on their phone. This plays out time and time again in D&D. So instead, make it cooperative. Make it so that it requires multiple people. One time, I had my party split. The dungeon had split them, and I had one of them go in my living room and the other one come into my kitchen, and I gave each of them half of a puzzle. And one person had a list of numbers and a list of spaces, like dashes, like hangman, like I was saying before. And the other side had a piece of graph paper. And they had to communicate back and forth, one of them shouting out the numbers to the other, and the other one graphing it as they went. And the way it worked was, when you graphed the numbers properly, it wrote out letters to a word that they then put into the spaces. And it had to be the two-way communication puzzle solving, because when you're graphing this out, and the instructions don't say connect the lines, so they have to make a few logical leaps there, and the other side can't see what they're looking at. But when they finally pieced it together, it was because both sides worked together. In 3.25, make it work like rounds, like combat. In that same dungeon, they had a combat that was a similar cooperative puzzle. And so one side had 5 constructs standing and ready to fight them, and 5 on the ground, and the door was locked. And the other side had the same thing. And every time they destroyed a monster, one of the ones on the floor would stand up on this one, and vice versa. So if they were to both fight full on, they'd both be there forever, because a monster would fall, one would stand up, one would fall, one would stand up, and they'd just be trading monsters back and forth. Instead, one team defeated their enemies completely, the door unlocked, they went through it. And then the other team defeated their now 10 enemies and then went through their door. And so they had to figure that out, and they had to work together to make it happen, with damage and a timer. I ran a tile puzzle where miscalculations would cause damage to everyone in the room if they failed a con save. And so they took turns going in order around the table trying to solve this tile puzzle. And it kind of forced their hand, because the timer was going, it was their turn, and the team was relying on them. So everybody cooperated in the solution of this puzzle, even if under normal circumstances with less pressure on them, less people would have. Next, make it multifaceted, just like with the story about the constructs. Just like the story with the graph, numbers, and spaces, it takes all working in tandem to solve the puzzle. If there's multiple facets of the problem to be solved, multiple people can work on it. Everyone gets a turn being the hero. My favorite puzzle, I had, again, index cards with keys on them, drawn on them, taped around my house, hidden in different places. Players noticed that when they came in, they didn't know what to do about that until they got to a room where there were statues in this room. And the statues I was describing the party sitting around the room. And when they went up and touched their statue, the statue that corresponded with the player characters as player, the player appeared in, and then I began to describe my living room. The player character appeared in my living room, and they ran, found a key, and returned to the game world, had the key to progress. And every person was able to do this once, and each of them was able to get one of the 6 keys. It was team-based, it was multifaceted, it was tactile, and it was just a lot of fun. And I hope that helps you craft your campaign.